about simplifying implementation, the impact of a supply chain audit. So please, first, before starting, take the time to scan the QR code that you can see here on the screen. You can add your question on the pad. We will have a quick Q&A session at the end of this presentation. So today, I will be presenting our new service, the Supply Chain Audit, and how it can really impact an implementation. So I'm Antoine Lemegre. I'm here, an inventory expert here at Odoo. And before we start, I would like to ask you a simple question. Please take the time to think about, are you, in your daily life, truly efficient? By this I mean, do you think that you are always productive during your days? I'm telling you this because I think that you and I, we are not as effective as we think. So what could be actually here a good way to improve a bit our daily routine? It will be actually to take a step back, try to understand what are our bad habits. How can I modify this in order to make my daily routine more efficient, right? Actually, I'm telling you this because it's exactly the same in a supply chain. In a warehouse, people are doing things because they are used to do things. They might have inefficient processes, but they do not take the time to improve those processes. So now, let me ask you another question. Would you actually adapt Odoo to inefficient processes? Wouldn't it be a good way to start an implementation, or before an implementation, to take that step back in order to understand the processes of the company and try to align them a bit more with Odoo to make them more efficient? That's why today I will be presenting our new service, the Supply Chain Audit. I will start with the motivation that made us create this service. Then we will go through the service, so what is actually the service. And I will add our methodology to it. I will explain you our methodology. I will give you some concrete examples about what we've already achieved thanks to this service. And finally, we will conclude this presentation thanks to a Q&A session. So, first, let's start with the motivation. We had some pre-implementation observation that you can see here on the slide. Firstly, we observe that really often people, companies, they lack of supply chain expertise. This means that often they will use their common sense instead of data analysis in order to make decisions. They will base the decisions on intuition and not on best practices. And actually, they will never have the time to optimize their processes, as they are constantly busy with urgency in the warehouse. So actually, they just do not have the time to improve everything. Those observations, they have a direct impact on the business. They have direct consequences on the business. Firstly, we will have some processes that are inefficient in the warehouse. This will lead to long lead times, for example. It will also lead to a waste of resources and also to a competitive disadvantage for the company. So here, those observations, they lead actually to a higher cost due to a poor supply chain performance. But that's not all. It will also have some consequences on the ERP, in our case on Odoo. Because if you do not take the time to adapt the processes to what Odoo can do, you will have to adapt Odoo to those specific processes. And here you might have a slower implementation, you might have a multi-phase implementation and so on, so it might be a bit slower. Also, we all know that an ERP is actually working better with standardized flows, right? So if you do not take the time to improve a bit, to align a bit the processes with Odoo, you will have lower ERP benefits. And finally, this will increase the failure risk related to the implementation. So here we will have some extra implementation costs related to inefficiencies in the warehouse. So let me wrap up here this part about the motivation. I want you to remember that if you have an inefficient supply chain in a warehouse, it will impact two things. Firstly, the customer. In his daily routine, he might have inefficient processes and he will lose time by doing things in the warehouse. But it will also impact the implementation process of Odoo. It will be slower, you will have to adapt Odoo to the processes of the company, and it will cost a bit more money. So, now that we understood the motivation behind this service, let me tell you more about what is actually this service. This service is called Supply Chain Audit. It's a business-oriented service, and the idea is really to audit the supply chain of a company. In order for it to be relevant, we need three things. Firstly, we need the right people to provide this service. We need the right customer, and finally, we need to provide the service at the right moment. When I'm telling you about the right people in order to do the service, I'm thinking, for example, at the fact that at Odoo we are fortunate to have people with experience and expertise. When I think about experience, I think about people having done successfully many different projects. They've successfully implemented many projects. They are up to date with the tool. They know what Odoo can do. And thanks to that, they will be able to really give good advices to the customer. When I'm talking about expertise, I think about people with a supply chain background. People being able to understand what are the best practices of the industry. Being able to understand what is a bottleneck, where to find it, and how to kill it. So here the objective is really to provide business guidelines that are consistent with Odoo. Then we need to find the ideal customer. For this service to be effective, we are looking for companies with a lack of supply chain expertise. So actually companies that do not have the necessary background in order to take that step back and understand if the processes are efficient or not and how they could improve those processes. We are also looking for companies with bottlenecks that are often facing some bottlenecks in their daily routines. And finally, companies with enough operations, because we believe that it doesn't make sense to audit companies that without any complexity. So here the objective is really to optimize the processes and reduce the cost efficiently. Then we need to provide the service at the right time, at the right moment. Here we believe that the best moment in order to provide the service is after the pre-sales analysis, but before the implementation. I don't know if you are familiar with the ROI analysis, but we believe that the best moment is right before the ROI analysis, in parallel of it, or right after. So here, please simply remember after the pre-sales analysis, before the implementation. And the point here is really to deepen the analysis in order to simplify and fasten the implementation. So that's about our service. But now, what is actually our work methodology? Our work methodology is actually divided in 4 key points. Firstly, we assess the situation. We have to understand what is going on in the warehouse. What are the processes? How is it working? Then we define a scope with the customer in order to understand what we will have to analyze thanks to our service. We will after provide the analysis in order to improve the processes thanks to the delivery of a report containing all of our recommendations. So let me tell you a bit more here about the assessment. The assessment of the warehouse, the point here is really to understand what is the company's situation and what is the company's strategy. In order to do this, we often do a complexity and maturity warehouse analysis. This is a tool that is provided in the book Highly Competitive Warehouse Management that I, by the way, highly recommend to you. And we also recommend to do an on-site visit, because thanks to the on-site visit, you will create a link with the customer. You will also really understand what is going on in the warehouse, and you will understand the spirit of the company. So the point here is really to audit the current processes of the company. Then we define the scope actually with the customer. In order to do this, we firstly need to have a complete overview about the processes and the operations of the warehouse. We need a complete vision about the bottlenecks, and after, with the customer, we will decide which bottlenecks we will analyze thanks to our service and which we won't analyze. Because it makes no sense to analyze everything. We want to analyze bottlenecks that will have the most added value for the company if we succeed to kill them. So here we are choosing which bottleneck to analyze thanks to an 80-20 philosophy. When the scope is defined, we start the analysis part. We have two parts for this analysis. Firstly, the industry best practices. We know many best practices, and the point here is to think about maybe there is a best practice that the company is not using and that might be really useful for them. Then we start to analyze customer-specific bottlenecks. This part, we analyze it apart from the first one because we believe that a warehouse has always its specific problems, its specific bottlenecks. And so we really need to analyze them apart. When we are done with this analysis part, we improve the processes. We will improve those processes thanks to a final report. The final report will contain three things. Firstly, best practices recommendations. Then the customer-specific recommendation. And finally, an action plan with a timeline. So divided in three parts, which recommendation do you have to implement before the implementation of Odoo, during the implementation of Odoo, and after the implementation of Odoo. So that's it about here the methodology. And let me now give you some concrete example in order for you to really understand what we provide as recommendation to our customer. First thing that we recommend is an industry best practice. We already recommended it. It had a real impact on the customer, and it's the ABC classification. I think that you might all know what is the ABC classification, but I will still explain it. But actually we observe that many people know what it is, but they are not really using it in a warehouse. And it's a pity because it's really useful in order to optimize the movement of the operators in the warehouse. So here, the idea is quite simple. We need to group the stock in three different categories. The A category will be the stock that is the products that are the most used, the 20% most used products of the warehouse. And those products, we will locate them close to the operators. Then we will have the B category, containing the 30% moderately used product of the warehouse that will be located a bit further from the operators. And finally, the C category that will be located really further from the operators. So here we implemented it and it worked because it optimized really the movements of the operators around the warehouse. Another industry best practice that I would like to share with you today is the use of key performance indicators. It's something that we all know, but many people are not using it. Many people are actually deciding things based on their own intuition, their common sense, and they are not using data analysis. And it's really useful because it will help you to measure the performance of your warehouse. Am I on time with my deliveries? What is the quality of my suppliers? And so on. It will also guide your decision making, help you to make the right decision. It will help you to monitor your processes and to improve your processes if those are not efficient enough. And finally, it can help to motivate your operators. You can give them goals and they will like to achieve them. So here, this is a nice, a good industry best practice, and we like to recommend it because actually, with the dashboard in Odoo, you can build your own KPIs. So it can really work well with Odoo as well. Now, let me give you more information about one of the customer-specific bottlenecks that we recently analyzed and that we recommended something quite interesting. So here the point was to analyze the structure of the warehouse. The point was to understand, are the storage locations at the right place in order to optimize the movement of the operators in the warehouse. Here in this case, we observed that our customer had to always do a quality check during when he received product from the suppliers, but actually the quality check zone was located near to the output zone. So all the time they had to go from the reception area to the quality check zone and come back to the reception area. So we recommend that to them to directly include the quality check zone in the reception area. They did it, and now we see that the efficiency of the warehouse has increased because the movements are really more optimized in the warehouse. Something else that we recently and that we like to really analyze here, it's about the picking methods that are used in the company. So here we had a simple case. So the customer had 3 different storage locations, located not that close to each other, and all the time for each order, they had to go through zone A, and then zone B, and then zone C, in order to pick the products. So here, we thought a bit about the situation, and we decided to introduce them to wave picking. Meaning that here, they have one operator responsible of zone A, that will only pick the products from zone A and bring them to the consolidation zone. The same will happen in zone B, with one operator responsible for zone B, and the same for zone C. And here, thanks to this recommendation, actually they need less operators in order to pick their products, and they need less time. And cherry on the cake here, this is working really well with Odoo. And so today they are doing wave picking thanks to Odoo, and they modified their picking methods. So that's it here about my concrete examples. So let me here give you a concrete example about the action plan that we provide at the end of our report. Here with the 4 recommendations, for example, let's take the first one, modify the warehouse structure. So here we decided to recommend the customer to implement it before the implementation of Odoo. We added a 3-star priority to it, and as you can see, this was the 11th recommendation of the report. And the same logic is applied on each recommendation of our report. So before Odoo, during the implementation of Odoo, and after the implementation of Odoo. So that's it here about the concrete examples. So I will now conclude this presentation. For my conclusion, I would like you to remember 3 things, 3 key benefits. Firstly, without even thinking about Odoo, this will help you to optimize your daily operations in your warehouse. Okay? Then it will help you to align your processes with Odoo, which is really useful because if you do this, you won't have to adapt Odoo too much to your processes. And finally, this will lead to a simplification and an acceleration of the implementation. So here, one last thing that I would like you to remember is the next time that you have an implementation, please take the time to take a step back, okay? Take the step back in order to understand if your processes are efficient. Are they aligned with Odoo? And here, a great way to do this is to start with a supply chain audit. If you are a customer of, maybe you plan to become a customer of Odoo, you can directly scan this QR code here in order to have all the information about the service, and you can directly plan a meeting or ask to plan a meeting if needed. If you are a partner and you feel that this might be quite interesting for one of your customers, please feel free to do the same. And this applies also to current customers if you would like to take the time to improve a bit your processes. So please take the time to scan this. That's it for my presentation here, and we will start with the Q&A session now.
Thank you very much, Antoine, for the presentation. It was, I think, very clear. We don't have much questions yet, but don't hesitate to scan the QR code here to have the access to the pad and ask your questions. But we already have one question in the audience here, asking, when working on a company transformation project, one of the big challenges is to get the customer to collaborate and be an actor when they have to lead with operational management. Yeah. And that person is asking, how do you deal with this, with that question of change management?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so actually that's a good question. And we always try to add this recommendation in our report, and it's the first one. It's about the change management. You know that when you have to change your processes, it leads to a lot of modifications, and sometimes operators, they are not happy about it because they are used to something and they do not want to change it. So here, the best way to do it is to convince first the key users. So maybe the CEO of the company, the key person that are in the warehouse, because they need to show the example. And if they are aware of it, it will be easier for the implementation, it will be easier to modify the flows. And so that's what we recommend. And often it works because they understand what is here, the needs in order to, for actually the Odoo implementation to go well, and also with the service and the modification in the warehouse.
And I think we do it with much care with the teams, right?
Yes.
We are very much paying attention to that. We are doing in such a way that it's not too invasive, I would say.
Exactly, that's the point.
Someone else is asking, how long does an audit take?
Yes, that's a pretty good question. So often, on average, we take like 5 days to do this service. So it's 40 hours, but it really depends on the complexity of the warehouse. You might have a lot of complexity, it might take us like 8 days. Or you might have less complexity, it might take us 2 or 3 days. So it really depends. We have to discuss first the project, the complexity, understand how it works, and then we decide the time needed.
Someone else is asking, can partners get trained to perform this service?
Yes, of course, and that's why we invite them to also simply scan the QR code. By the way, I did not talk about it, but we have here some business card with all the information about the service, if you would like to take one at the end. But yeah, we can train them, and we can also help them to provide the service for their customers.
Still around, I would say, the time that it might take to do the audit. Someone is asking how to estimate the cost for an audit analysis.
It will be really correlated with the time needed. So actually, we have to discuss, we have to understand the complexity, but it's almost the same answer that for the first question. So yeah, the cost will be related to the time needed for the service.
I would say at the moment we are close to a success pack of 50 hours,
yes.
50 hours.
Yeah.
But sometimes when we have to go on site and we have the time to travel, it might be a bit bigger.
Depends, but on average I would say 40 hours.
On average is 40. Someone else is writing a new question. We will first switch to that one. Are the 40 hours just for the on-site visit?
No. It's really for you to receive the final product. So a report containing around 30 pages of recommendations, best practices, and customer-specific recommendations with the timeline at the end.
Someone else is saying you were concentrating on pre-implementation use cases. Can we also use this service to audit and revamp existing implementations?
Yes. So I explained that it's the best moment is to do it before an implementation. But let's say you are about to start a new phase, or you want us to audit your current processes because you think that your processes might be inefficient or not aligned enough with Odoo. We can do it, and it can have a real added value for you as well.
And here we have another question saying, can you collaborate with third-party financial auditors in supply chain audits?
Yes, we can do this. We have a service on it, by the way, and so we could do it in order to tackle supply chain questions, but also financial questions.
I think we have an interesting question here. Do you use simulations on Odoo during the audit to make sure that the new suggested practices fit Odoo? And I think indeed it's a challenge that we are meeting, because when we do the audit after the ROI, this is something that we need to take into account, right?
Yes, so every time we recommend something, we have Odoo in mind. So the point is really to provide here advice, to provide recommendations that are aligned with Odoo, in order to make sure that you won't have to adapt to create a huge development in order to include one of our recommendations.
I think that's pretty much it. So time to read the congratulations. Someone said you did great. Antoine, you rock. So again, congratulations for this talk.
Thank you.
And of course, if there are any additional questions, you are available, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I will finish with this. Here you have the QR code in order to plan a meeting if needed. We are always available at the inventory booth at the end of the room here if you have questions about the service. And please take one of the cards here if you feel that you might be interested and if you need more information about it. Thank you.